Terrifying true stories to start 2026. December 31st, 2025, 11:47 p.m. 13 minutes until the new year, and Detective Maria Santos was sitting in her unmarked car outside the Riverside Psychiatric Hospital, staring at a case file that made no sense. 3 patients had died in the past week, all from different wings of the hospital, all with no prior connection to each other, all found dead at exactly 11:58 p.m. on different nights. And all 3 had written the same message before dying. It comes at midnight. 2026 brings it through. Maria had dismissed it as the ravings of mentally ill patients until the hospital's head psychiatrist, Dr. James Chun, called her personally that afternoon with a disturbing revelation. "Detective Santos, I need you to understand something," Dr. Chin had said, his voice shaking. "These patients weren't delusional. I've reviewed their files extensively. All 3 were being treated for depression or anxiety. Perfectly coherent, rational individuals. But in the 3 days before each death, they all experienced the same hallucination. A figure standing at the foot of their bed, counting down to midnight on New Year's Eve. Hallucinations are common in psychiatric facilities," Maria had replied. "Yes, but not shared hallucinations. Not the same entity, described in identical terms, appearing to patients in separate wings who've never met. And detective, the security footage shows something. That's why Maria was here now, 12 minutes from midnight, parked outside the hospital with Dr. Chen's words echoing in her mind. Come tonight. Watch the cameras. See for yourself what appears when the clock strikes midnight." Maria's radio crackled. "Detective Santos, this is hospital security. Dr. Chun is waiting for you in the monitoring room." Maria grabbed her flashlight and badge and headed inside. The hospital at night was different from during the day. The fluorescent lighting seemed dimmer, the long corridors more oppressive, the sound of patients shifting in their beds, carrying a note of anxiety. Dr. Chin met her at the monitoring room, his face pale and drawn. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Thank you for coming. I know this sounds insane, but I needed someone from outside the hospital to witness this, to verify I'm not losing my mind." The monitoring room was filled with screens showing various areas of the hospital, hallways, common rooms, individual patient rooms. Dr. Chin pulled up footage from the night of December 28th, the most recent death. This is Margaret Holloway, 73 years old, admitted for clinical depression after her husband's death. Watch what happens at 11:55 p.m. Maria watched the grainy black and white footage. Margaret lay in her bed, apparently asleep. The room was empty, the door closed. Then, at exactly 11:55 p.m., Margaret's eyes opened. She sat up and looked toward the corner of her room, the corner where the camera had a blind spot. Margaret's mouth moved, speaking to something the camera couldn't see. Her expression changed from confusion to terror. She grabbed a pencil from her nightstand and scribbled frantically on a notepad. At 11:58 p.m., Margaret went rigid. Her body arched off the bed, her mouth open in a silent scream. Then, as if a switch had been flipped, she collapsed, dead. "That's when we found the note," Dr. Chin said. "It comes at midnight. 2026 brings it through." The same message the other 2 wrote before dying. Maria felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you think it means?" "I don't know, but I think we're about to find out." Dr. Chin checked his watch. "It's 11:49. 11 minutes until midnight, until 2026. And detective, we have another patient who's been seeing the figure." Maria's blood ran cold. "Who?" "Thomas Brady. Room 217. He started seeing it 3 days ago, exactly the same timeline as the others. He's been begging us not to leave him alone at midnight. He says when the clock strikes 12, the figure will come for him, And based on the pattern, he'll die at 11:58, Maria finished. 2 minutes before the entity's supposed arrival. They ran through the hospital corridors, their footsteps echoing off the walls. Other staff members had gathered near room 217, their faces tense. Through the observation window, Maria could see Thomas Brady, a thin man in his 40s, sitting on his bed, rocking back and forth, his eyes fixed on the corner of the room. "Mr. Brady," Maria said, entering the room with Dr. Chun. "I'm Detective Santos. Can you tell me what you're seeing?" Thomas's eyes didn't leave the corner. "It's there. It's been there for 3 days, just watching, waiting. It doesn't move, doesn't speak, just stands there and counts on its fingers. Every night at midnight, it counts down from 10, and each countdown brings it closer to being complete." "Complete?" Maria asked. "What do you mean?" "It's not fully here. Not yet. It's like it's behind glass, pressing against reality, but not quite breaking through. But each midnight, each countdown, it gets more solid, more real. And tonight," Thomas's voice broke. "Tonight is when it breaks through completely. When 2026 begins. That's what the numbers mean. 2-0-2-6. 26 minutes after midnight is when." The lights in the hospital flickered. Maria checked her watch. 11:53 p.m. 7 minutes until midnight. "Thomas, the other patients who saw this entity, they died at 11:58. We need to get you out of this room. Now." But Thomas shook his head violently. "No, it doesn't matter where I am. It's locked onto me. I can feel it. The countdown has already begun." As if to confirm his words, the temperature in the room dropped. Maria's breath became visible, condensation forming on the windows, and in the corner where Thomas had been staring, something began to manifest. At first, it was just a shadow, slightly darker than the surrounding darkness. But as Maria watched, it gained definition, height, form. It was tall, impossibly tall, with limbs that were too long and a head that tilted at an angle that made Maria's stomach churn. And it was counting, not with its voice. It had no voice, but with its fingers. Long, skeletal fingers that ticked off numbers in a rhythm that matched the beating of Maria's heart. Dr. Chin grabbed Maria's arm. "Do you see it? Please tell me you see it." "I see it," Maria whispered, her hand moving to her service weapon, though she knew bullets wouldn't help against whatever this was. The entity continued counting, and with each number, it became more solid, more real. Maria could see details now. The texture of its skin, if it was skin, the way it moved with fluidity that was completely wrong, the absence where its face should be. 11:56 p.m. Thomas began to scream. "It's counting faster. It's almost at 10. When it reaches 10, the entity's fingers moved in rapid succession. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. At exactly 11:58 p.m., Thomas Brady's body went rigid, his eyes rolling back. Blood began to pour from his nose, his ears, his eyes. He collapsed onto the bed, clearly dead, just like the others. But the entity didn't disappear. Instead, it turned its faceless head toward Maria and Dr. Chun, and it held up all 10 fingers. Then it began to count down again. "Run," Maria shouted, grabbing Dr. Chun and pulling him from the room. They burst into the hallway as the hospital's clock tower began to chime. Midnight, the beginning of 2026. The lights throughout the entire hospital went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. And from every corner, every shadow, more entities began to appear. Dozens of them, all identical to the one in Thomas's room, all counting down on their skeletal fingers. Patients screamed. Staff members ran in panic. Maria pulled Dr. Chin toward the nearest exit, but the entities were everywhere, manifesting from the darkness, their counting synchronized, terrifying. 10, 9, 8, 7. What happens when they reach 0? Dr. Chin gasped as they ran. I don't want to find out, Maria replied. They reached the main entrance just as the countdown hit 3. Maria crashed through the doors and into the parking lot. Dr. Chin right behind her. Behind them, the hospital was in chaos. People fleeing from every exit, sirens wailing, the red emergency lights pulsing like a heartbeat. And then, at exactly 12:01 a.m., the first minute of 2026, the entities all reached 0 simultaneously. The hospital exploded, not with fire or debris, but with light, a brilliant, terrible light that seemed to come from another dimension. Maria shielded her eyes, and when she could see again, the hospital was changed. It looked the same structurally, but wrong in subtle ways. The angles were slightly off, the windows reflected light that wasn't there, and through those windows, Maria could see movement. The entities were inside, moving through the building, no longer counting, no longer waiting. They were free. Emergency services arrived within minutes. Police, fire, ambulances. But when they tried to enter the hospital, they couldn't. It was as if an invisible barrier surrounded the building. Those trapped inside couldn't get out. Those outside couldn't get in. And through the windows, Maria could see the entities moving through the corridors, could see patients and staff members frozen in place, could see the beginning of something that would spread beyond those walls as 2026 progressed. Because this wasn't just about one hospital. Maria's phone began buzzing with alerts. Similar incidents at psychiatric facilities across the country, all occurring at exactly midnight, all featuring the same entities, the same countdown, the same transition as the calendar changed to 2026. Dr. Chin stood beside Maria, his face illuminated by the otherworldly light emanating from a hospital. "What have we done?" he whispered. "What kind of year have we brought into existence?" Maria didn't have an answer. She could only watch as the entities continued their work inside the hospital, as the first day of 2026 began with a horror that no one had anticipated and no one could stop. Because sometimes the new year doesn't bring hope and fresh starts. Sometimes it brings something else entirely, something that's been waiting, counting down, preparing to break through when the calendar changes and the barriers between worlds grow thin. 2026 had arrived, and it had brought its own residents with it. Happy New Year!